The Bible has tens of thousands of contradictions, like how Ezekiel says, a son is not to suffer because of his father's sins, nor a father because of the sins of his son. A good man will be rewarded for doing good, and an evil man will suffer for the evil he does. In other words, people should be held responsible for their own actions, and not the actions of other people who they happen to be related to. This is actually great. I mean, finally, God gets something right. But then God contradicts his own rule in Exodus by promising to punish the children and children's children to the third and fourth generation of those who sin. So God punishes you because your great-great-great-great-grandfather ate one piece of shrimp.
So is the Bible trustworthy? Part 2. Okay, so I'm going to go through 2 more claims of contradiction in the Bible. And the first one, of course, is going to be the one in the video that I just showed. Okay, so these 2 passages don't contradict each other. They actually complement each other when we're talking about sin and the effects of sin and what final judgment looks like. So in Exodus 20, Israel just got the 10 Commandments. About 10 verses earlier, they just came out of, 8 verses earlier, they just came out of Egypt from slavery. They just got the 10 Commandments, and God is essentially warning them of the generational effects that sin has. He's warning them not to fall back into idolatrous and other pagan ritualistic practices, and what will happen if they do. So Ezekiel highlights the ripple effects of sin here. So in Ezekiel 18, even though it was written almost 900 years later after Exodus, we're getting a different aspect of sin. So essentially the point being highlighted here is that God's final judgment is always personal. So each soul answers for his own sin, not for the choices of others. What we see from these 2 verses side by side: sin has real-world consequences and can touch generations. No one is condemned for eternity for what their ancestors did. Each person can choose life and repent through faith. So again, the focus here in Exodus is that God is highlighting the social and cultural impact of sin and how patterns can affect generations. He warns that sin can leave scars, which can be seen for generations. So it's certainly much more profound and much deeper than eating shrimp or something like that, which the gentleman earlier pointed out. So in a modern sense, this would be sort of like drug addiction, alcoholism, sexual and verbal abuse, things like that, highlighting how those sort of sins can affect generations to come. So we see in Exodus, it's highlighted that sin can have real life damage to generations. Sin doesn't just affect the individual, but in Ezekiel, it's highlighted that the individual is ultimately judged for their own personal sin. Okay, so claim of contradiction 2 comes from a commenter on one of my previous videos. I'll put it up on the screen here, but I'm going to read the English Standard Version. I think he looks like he's using a King James version, which is not my favorite to read. So I'll read it here. So in Leviticus 24, 19 through 20, verse 19 says, "If anyone injures his neighbor, as he has done, it shall be done to him." Verse 20, "Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever injury he has given a person shall be given to him." And then in Matthew 5, verse 38, it says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." So Jesus is citing the Levitican Mosaic law here. And then in verse 39, he says, "But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." For my notes here, I'm just going to give you 3 takeaways from how to interpret these verses side by side, and why Jesus is quoting the Levitican verse there from the Mosaic Law, and what it means when Jesus is speaking in that context. First takeaway, we have 2 settings, 1 author. Leviticus 24 speaks to Israel's courtroom. So judges must keep punishment strictly proportional, eye for an eye, which stops blood feuds from spiraling, essentially. So this is setting the stage for saying what a courtroom must do in terms of keeping punishments proportional. Matthew 5, in Matthew 5, this is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He speaks to personal ethics. So first we see matters of a courtroom, and now Jesus is speaking to matters of one's heart. So speaking to personal ethics, disciples must not turn that courtroom rule into private payback. So instead they model radical mercy, turn the other cheek. Takeaway 2, Justice versus vengeance. God still wants public justice. Proportional penalties protect society, but he forbids personal vengeance. Retaliation poisons the heart is the takeaway from that. So same principle, different spheres. So takeaway 3, this is fulfillment, not cancellation, which is the whole point of Jesus here. He is fulfilling, he is not canceling anything out. Jesus doesn't throw out the law here, just as described in Leviticus. He fulfills the law by pushing it from the external minimum, fair punishment, to the internal maximum, showing the cost of love, essentially. So, courts apply to Leviticus. Christians embody Matthew chapter 5. Bottom line, eye for an eye guards the courtroom, turn the other cheek guards the heart. So just like the first claim, we see justice in a more broader sense. And then in the second verse, we see justice, how it applies to a more personal and internal sense. So thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Comment what you thought of this video. If I got something wrong, as always, mention it, and we can hopefully have some meaningful conversation.